I read something recently that made me go, Almost 20 years ago, then president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, the Reverend William G. Sinkford, was talking with a reporter about the UUA's call for marriage equality when he used the phrase, "We stand on the side of love." UU composer Jason Shelton was there too. He was inspired to write the song, "Standing on the Side of Love," and it quickly. A few years later, the UUA launched a public advocacy campaign of the same name with its signature yellow t-shirts that gave UUs everywhere an easy way to identify themselves. Now, though popular, the language of standing was problematic. Not everyone can stand. So to say that UUs do justice by standing on the side of love means what? That people who can't stand can't do justice? So because we want to be an inclusive and welcoming faith, the UUA changed their campaign's name to Side with Love, and Shelton changed his song to Answering the Call of Love. Now, out of my own temporarily able-bodied privilege, I liked the language of standing on the side of love as a statement of our values. But I had to get over myself and recognize that it was hurting a number of my fellow UUs. Still, I miss having such a statement, and I don't think I've ever actually said that we are siding with love. Makes me think of vinyl. What made me go, recently was something a colleague wrote, that what we do as UUs is err on the side of love. We try to be on the side of love, but we're not perfect, and we make mistakes. Sometimes we do use language that ends up hurting our friends. We want to get it right, but we know that even the best of intentions can result in bad outcomes. We think we can tell which side love is on, so we try to be on that side too, but it's not always that simple, and we're only human, and sometimes we get it wrong. As we muddle along through life then, as we struggle to make the world a better, more inclusive, more welcoming place, we can at least attempt to shift more of our failings to be on the side of love than not. Of course, I had hoped to end up with a more forceful statement, but there it is. We err on the side of love, a more humble statement, and maybe that's actually better. This is the mission of our faith, says past UUA President Bill Schultz, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands. Easy, right? Well, no. That's why we can only say that we err on the side of love. Hospitality is a fragile art. Oh, it's easy to extend a warm welcome to someone we already know, someone who seems like us, someone with a shared purpose. Obviously, the church in the story Sandy just read was doing a good enough job of welcoming people who were already members, people who readily fit in, or their sanctuary wouldn't have been packed. But hospitality is more difficult when it's someone we don't know, someone who seems different from us, someone we worry won't fit in, someone like Bill in the story. And this fragile art isn't merely about saying hello to someone, opening the door for them and helping them find a seat, though those are all necessary. Rather, we're talking about something that goes by the name of radical hospitality. Now, I know that the word radical is often taken to mean extreme, maybe even dangerous, but its primary meaning is of the root, fundamental, essential, vital. In this sense, radical hospitality is not only about reaching out to others, but also about reaching inward to ourselves. It's not only a way of helping others in need, but also a way of helping ourselves become more human. Radical hospitality meets our most basic need to be known, acknowledging the vulnerability of being human and taking the risk of allowing another person into our hearts in order to be stronger than we are alone. Perhaps it's not surprising that radical hospitality is often described not as something we merely ought to do because, say, we want to be a good host. No, it's not a duty or an obligation. It's a spiritual practice. That's in large part thanks to the Benedictines, and it has deep historical roots. 1,500 years ago, in what is now Italy, in a society reeling from the fall of the Roman Empire, Benedict of Nursia sought to create communities that embodied the wisdom needed to last through chaotic times. He found that wisdom in a commitment to our common humanity, recognizing that there's a paradox. We live and die as individuals, and yet we only grow and learn about ourselves if we live that aloneness in community with others. And that's at the root of radical hospitality. As Benedictine Sister Joan Chittister says, it is the way we come out of ourselves. It is the first step towards dismantling the barriers of the world. Radical hospitality invites us to see ourselves in others and others in us, to meet our needs for connection and understanding by meeting those same needs in other people. Again, that's easier said than done. But that's why radical hospitality is a spiritual practice. It's something that we have to practice. We do our best to err on the side of love, and when, not if, we fall short, we find a way to forgive ourselves and each other so that we can begin again in love. Moreover, it's not going to look the same to every person. Radical hospitality takes courage because it asks us to reach beyond our own comfort zones. So it might take a lot of courage from an introvert to go up to someone they don't know and start a conversation. I've practiced this a lot over the last 20-odd years, and it's still not easy for me. But for an extrovert, talking to a stranger might take no courage at all. For someone who is peaceful and at ease, it might not be hard at all for them to help a newcomer figure out where things are and answer their questions and help them get settled in. But for someone who's had a bad week and has way too much on their mind, it might be all they can do to shift over a seat to let someone else sit down. The Benedictines describe radical hospitality as that which enables you to joyfully make room for another inside your open heart. And that's going to be a very different challenge for different people. But as a congregation, we have promised to work on it, making it the very first part of our congregational covenant to welcome everyone of goodwill. This is our intention as a congregation to practice radical hospitality, to actively offer a generously wholehearted invitation to both stranger and friend to connect in love. And so we have greeters and ushers, not just to say hello to people, open the door for them and help them find a seat, though those are all necessary, but to help them feel at home, to help them feel comfortable and welcome. We also have name badges, whether engraved, printed, or stick-on, to help us learn one another's names. And that's not just because some of us are bad at remembering names. Being named is an essential step in the process of belonging. After being noticed, and before being known. We also have a culture of all members, even the introverts, doing their part to welcome newcomers. Some of that, as I've said before, is a consequence of our limited and often crowded space. So we'll need to be really intentional about maintaining and even expanding our culture of welcoming once we've moved to a larger space. Why do we practice radical hospitality? Our society may not be as chaotic and dangerous as when Benedict was figuring it out, although some days it certainly feels like it is. But the fact is that there are so few places where people can truly be in community with one another, where we can get to know one another deeply, where we can really feel like we belong. That's the sort of place this congregation has said it wants to be. And it starts with welcoming one another as we would wish to be welcomed into our own home. I'm going to ask you some wondering questions now, and I'll give you a little time after each to reflect. Lynn will also put each question on the screen as I ask it. I wonder when you have felt truly welcomed. I wonder how you relate to the side of love. I wonder where forgiveness is showing up in your life right now. I wonder what the fragile art of hospitality means to you. Earlier this month, your President Beck Wheeler and I attended a civilian response to active shooter events training offered by Hilton Presbyterian Church and the Newport News Police Department. There was a lot of good information there, but since the subject of radical hospitality was on my mind, it did make me think. I mean, perhaps the Benedictine monks who practice it all the time would actually be able to genuinely welcome someone who clearly meant them harm. But I don't think the rest of us are under such an obligation to put ourselves and our community at risk. That same week, the Unitarian Universalist Association had posted something on its Facebook page. It read, "You'll feel at home in a UU congregation if you're looking for a space in which you can be open and be your true self. We honor all people for who they are, regardless of their actions. To many people, our faith feels like coming home." This was part of asking how congregations are preparing to welcome newcomers as we go into the fall, and almost all of it is good. Almost all of it. The part that isn't good is saying that we honor all people regardless of their actions. That's not true. I'm sure you can all think of actions that we do not and should not have to accept, even as we say all are welcome. Actually, we don't say we'll welcome everyone. Rather, we covenant to welcome everyone of goodwill. Sure, we would like to be able to welcome everybody regardless, but for the sake of people's safety and the health of our community, we cannot accept all behaviors. Even as we acknowledge that we can only err on the side of love, we must hold people accountable for their actions if they have caused hurt and harm. So not only is radical hospitality a spiritual practice that looks different for different people, but it also depends on how much we're willing to risk people's safety and the health of our community. But does this mean we shouldn't try to practice it? Of course not. Part of our mission as a congregation is to connect in love. Our current UUA covenant says that we affirm and promote acceptance of one another, while part of the proposed new covenant is to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. These are already clear and vital calls to practice the fragile art of hospitality, giving us plenty of reasons to welcome both friends and strangers as we offer one another a generously wholehearted invitation to build the beloved community together. May it be so.